Welcome to An Hour with a Manager, your go-to podcast platform where we share industry insights from the best experts, ranging from customer experience, human resources, and much more. Join us for an hour of informative discussions, practical advice, and inspiring stories from the world of management. Stay tuned.
My name is Diana Williams. I'm a special education consultant based out of New York, and really excited to be here today to talk about my leadership journey and how I lead my team and those that I work with. Started my career down in Camden, New Jersey as a teacher. And over the years have worked with students in kindergarten all the way to second grade, which is the equivalent of about 5 years old to 7 and 8 years old. Most recently, I work at KIPP, New Jersey as the Director of Special Education, where I oversee our 5 elementary schools special education department, just supporting the assistant principals, supporting the teachers, so ensuring that we can provide quality school experiences and educations to our students with disabilities specifically. Additionally, I have a special education consulting business where I work with leaders throughout the country to increase their special education content knowledge, their capacity, and just overall impacts within their role. And so that has looked like me providing them with one-day professional development to increase their ability to respond to behavior. So behavior management courses that are rooted in trauma-informed care. I've also provided academic PDs that are rooted in data analysis to make data-informed decisions to improve the quality of instruction and execution for teachers, as well as leadership development. So working with leaders to increase their adaptive skills and their ability to grow teams, to retain teams, and to really optimize and get the most out of their teams as well. And so I'm really excited to be here today to be able to share some things that I have held true to my leadership over the years that have proven to be really successful. And you're back at the perfect time.
So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much, Diana, for that. Apologies for these guys. We just have to, manage that for today to the capacity we can. Hopefully, we'll be able to maybe someday have to travel to visit Diana at New York City to probably host a physical podcast. We're looking forward to that someday. And so we don't have to be having network issue over here with all of that. But nevertheless, for now, we'll do with what we have while we push for the future. So thank you very much, everybody, for being patient with us. And I'm hoping that the internet, now that it's balanced, it would give us a safe landing to get to hear Diana's experience and also get to talk about some very interesting things with her and look at how we can push for the future of education. Because on our previous discussion on An Hour with a Manager, if you had follow up with us in July, happy August to everybody. I just remember that. So in July, we had some discussions on capacity building, new managers, right? How to support people managers. We had discussions on employee engagement, right? And which were very, very insightful with different guests, and also how to build a lasting brand, right? But in talking about capacity building and looking at what we're discussing today, how after you've been able to build up that solid system in your team, right, to give them the liberty to learn and grow in their career and build that team bonding, right? How do you follow up? How do you follow up in each of these guys? What should you do to follow up? In different industry, particularly in education, what is education looking like tomorrow? Look, what is it looking like today? How are we leveraging technology to improve education? And Diana is really doing an amazing thing, leveraging technology to educate the younger ones who are the future leaders of tomorrow. We all are the future leaders of tomorrow, even though sometimes it looks like we're not the leaders, but actually we are the leaders of tomorrow. So to everyone who's listening to this, please do well to invite your folks, invite your friends, your team members, your employers. Let's learn together. Hopefully, we don't get distorted by the internet again. So thank you very much, everybody, today. So our discussion today is on the role of follow-up in leadership and management, right, in education. And since Diana's already introduced herself to us, which I believe a lot of us know about her, with her 10 years of experience, who will be sharing quite some very insightful discussion with us today. We'll just move straight to ask Diana maybe a little bit question about herself again. moving into special education, right? What was the drive for you to choose special education as your own major? Let me put it that way.
Definitely. So I actually came into education untraditionally. I went to college and got my degree in public health and sociology. I had the opportunity to join an organization called Teach for America that works to recruit folks into teaching specifically for 2 years to serve in underserved communities primarily, but also to get people experiences so that they can understand what some of the plights that public schools and inner city communities are facing. The program itself is serving to educate these people. And then after 2 years, it's the thought that they would go on to other areas and sectors within life to advocate for the needs of education. So people have gone on to be lawyers or politicians or advocates in many different realms. And so after I started teaching for 2 years, I did my 2 year commitment and then I decided that I wanted to continue. And so throughout the years, I worked in classrooms with a co-teacher. I hear a little echo, by the way. I worked with co-teachers in a classroom, and eventually, when I moved into leadership, I was overseeing special education, where I then went back to school to get formally certified in special education. And it has been such a tremendous experience of learning how to meet the needs of our students in schools that have the most needs and are traditionally receiving the least amount of supports in schools. And it has transferred directly to my work with leaders because while special education has more recently become a buzzword and we're trying to do right by students with disabilities, there's still adults that may have had disabilities when they were younger that were undiagnosed or just not, their needs were not met. And so I try to apply these same strategies when working with adults and have shown that to be a little successful.
Something very interesting pushed me when I was looking through Diana's bio, right? Looking at her business, right, in special education as a consultant, right? So I watched the video of her having, what do you call it, a training session with kids from home. Where you get to have kids all learning in a very playful manner at that age of 5, and you have kids learning and they're connecting very well and they're very feeling very playful and they're feeling very good about it, like they're in the classroom. And you can imagine what this will look like the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the impact that age range will be causing in the next 10, 20 years and 30 years, which is going to be very amazing. And for me, it's something that it's not found everywhere, but we know we're having that in some other countries. We're having people have home school education rights, but it's also leveraging technology to see how to bring these kids on board, which is very important, which is very good, right? So seeing her pushing that in terms of special education, having to connect with different kinds of people, different human personality, those who are not who maybe in the sites you might not want to call them might not want to classify them as part of humans, but they're part of humans, right? Yes, but it's just because of certain disabilities that caused it that way. They speak, they understand, they flow, they connect, they want to also feel like you and me, right? Because I believe they had the opportunity to walk or to speak or to sit or to talk or to move like you and me. That would be very possible, and they won't really put that blame on themselves, right? So, but seeing her do such a work is very amazing, and being able to connect with these guys. So please, Diana, in your time managing kids of that age, right? What is very peculiar that makes that gives you that motivation to always go back to say no, this is a line of education I really want to settle in. This is where I want to be. These are the people I would really enjoy to spend most of my time with, while I giving my best for the betterment of the future.
Definitely. So when I think about my commitment and why I lasted so long to education, I often think about my favorite component, right? I love the littlest of kids. I love teaching students how to read. And I think about the students specifically that have been struggling for so long and they're seeing that their peers are reading and they're like, I can't read. And we work at it and we work at it over and over again. And eventually there's like a light bulb that comes on and they're like, oh my goodness, I can read. And I'm like, yes, that is the moment of why I stay in education. And it's very similar and it's interesting, right? And it goes to like one of the things that I value in leadership is the importance of giving and receiving feedback. And so in teaching, When a student is working, I will look at their work and provide them with feedback on how to make their work better, whether it's a writing piece to say, okay, now this time I need you to go back and add some juicy adjectives so that we can make, start to have a good story. In the same way with my staff members, if they plan a project or they're leading a lesson, I'm shining them for the things that they're doing great, but I'm also giving them that 1% change that they can do a little bit better. That way they're continuously moving from good to great and they're not staying stagnant. And so when we're giving and receiving feedback, and I even think about in watching the Olympics earlier today and the gymnasts, right? The precision that it takes for them to like keep their legs straight, keep their feet together is based off of the feedback and the direct coaching that they've received from their coach, is how I also apply to both children and to adults when working with them so that they know that we're working towards a shared goal of moving from good to great. So I hope that answered your question, but that's what kind of has me thinking of like the passion of why I stay in education and then how I've translated my experience as a teacher to a leader as well.
So I really appreciate that, and I like the fact that you were also keen to to reference that to today's Olympics. But I want to ask in understanding and enjoying that process of trying to see the impact you create into every person and see that change that it makes to them. Does it make you feel different from every other person?
Yeah. No, I don't feel any different because honestly, the work that I do is not about me. I show up every day and I provide the support to staff and students to help them. When thinking about kids, right? Like I'm making deliberate efforts in my interactions with them, whether it's saying their name when I see them in the hallway to have their day start on a bright note, or asking about how it was when they went to Pop Pop's house over the weekend, to show that I'm invested and I care about them. If it's a staff member, right, I am coaching them based off of the information that they provided to me on what their eventual goal is and where they want to achieve in life. So my role as a coach is very similar to like a facilitator. I'm here to provide the skills and support necessary to get the person that I'm working with from point A to point B. And once they get to point B, I love that. I pass them to the next person and I go to support another person. Um, so I don't think it's about me. It's not a thing. It's not about how I feel or anything like that. It's about how the person I'm supporting feels and getting what it is that they want.
Okay. So if it's about how the other person feels, right? So it means he or she needs to agree before he or she's teachable, right? If they don't agree, it means whatever system or structure you're going to bring up to help them to learn to move might not really work. If that's what you're saying.
Definitely, because I think another thing that I believe in is leading authentically. And so, whether it's a student or a teacher or just an adult in a different position, the first thing that I'm trying to do before I'm coaching you in any way is to build relationships. So, I want to know what are some of the things that you're into? What do you like? What are some of the things that you don't like about work and projects that you're not interested in pursuing? This information helps me because then when these tricky moments come up, one, I've invested enough social capital with you where I can have difficult conversations to push you, but I'm also able to provide you with additional opportunities to get you experiences and opportunities that you might not have been able to do previously. And so I think about specifically one teacher that I worked with in the past. We had formed a really strong personal relationship, which was good, which made the working relationship easier. But despite the different coaching methods that I did, um, he was really struggling in the classroom and not as effective as he could be. And so, based off of the relationship that we had developed, I was able to have a conversation, an honest conversation, to say that this is not working. And he's like, yes, I don't think I want this either. And so it's what can I do for you to support you in the next step, so that way you are feeling more successful and your outcomes are more successful because right now it's not working. And I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation if we didn't have that strong relationship to begin with.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that in depth. Uh, sorry for. Yeah. So Please, apologies for the glitch you're having, man. We just have to manage a little bit of that. But I was hearing you very clearly, and thank God for my laptop for being very audible for me to hear you and your input. And it's good. It's good that when you find the kids fully accept what they want to do, and then it becomes an easy way for you to teach them, and also share the impact with them. And like you said, for the future, because most importantly, I don't know if it's general thing, but some kids when they get out there and then everything moves smoothly, they probably forget the teacher. I don't know if you also experience that, but we're hoping that we can build a system where we also find the kids still come back to give regards to where they started their entire learning process from. But now, in talking about follow up and how to engage, to build the future leaders, which is one of the first step you were doing, leveraging technology, leveraging your own expertise and your own brand, to promote digital education and also promote learning, good learning and good managerial steps. What are some of the things that you've seen that is really going on across leadership, across board in the educational sector that, you know, we have what do you call it? Sometimes you find a government, maybe for example, you might find the government say, oh, this shouldn't happen or that shouldn't happen, or maybe the leadership of a school might say, this structure, this process of doing things is not what should be expected, but right. And after making those statements, you don't still follow up to know how if it's going to be implemented or it's not going to be implemented, or what is left for you to do, right? So how do you engage with these guys? How do you engage with the right people to follow up and do the right things that needs to be done if some regulations have been passed across, for everybody to follow up.
Definitely. So I think first, it's important for you to understand the changes that are happening. Can you mute yourself too, so I don't hear the feedback? So I think the first thing is to truly understand what it is that the policies are asking to do and the rationale behind it. No matter what field you're in, sometimes decisions are going to be made from the top that you don't agree with. However, you have to abide by them and figure out how to gain buy-in from the people that you're serving. So on your team, if there's a difficult decision, because I know my people, I'm able to make the decision on maybe I need to have individual conversations with people that might take this hard before announcing it whole group, or I might have to frame it a certain way when I'm presenting it to the group about a change. And so the buy-in is really, really important when you lead authentically, when you have solid relationships with the folks that you work with. Even when they don't agree, they will still follow you. And I think that this can be both dangerous and great. But again, it always comes down to the leadership, to the relationship that you have with them, so that way you can work collaboratively towards executing whatever the change is. And I always tell my team, right? Like, if we don't agree with this plan, let's do it for some time. Let's collect the data. And then let's make data informed decisions on if this is something that we want to provide feedback to the higher ups, or if this is something that actually was not as bad. It was more shock value than anything else. And this could be beneficial in the long term. I often think about change management and behavior management to be very similar, right? Things are going to get worse before they get better. And people, being human, we don't like change. And so, most often, whether it's a positive one or not, folks are going to be up in arms a little bit when things are changing, but they have to, implement it with fidelity before they're, content on working against it to say that it actually did not work or not. So it should definitely be data informed, I believe.
Okay, so you made mention of change, right? So I just want to draw your attention back. So where have you seen change really impacted maybe most of maybe your team, right? In the space of them struggling to catch up with a new process or a new system which you're trying to, share with them.
There's a whole bunch of changes every year. I think about a lot of schools are now moving towards um, cell phone bans in school, where now they'll be having to hold students accountable for locking their phones in lockers. That's going to be something that's very challenging for teachers that, want to pick and choose their battles. I think about in previous experiences of a change in leadership that was unexpected, of what that sounds like, to reveal to staff and how to support them through that, and understanding that they have emotions, but they also have a job to do. And so when I was in that particular scenario, I led different listening tours where I had open door policy where anyone could stop by. share their thoughts and opinions. And I think that is a really, really important component of leadership, of just listening to your people, listening to the things that they're excited about and listening to the things that they might be a little worried about. And it doesn't even always mean that you have to do something about it or problem solve. Sometimes it's just about the listening. So change in schools happen often. I also think about since COVID, the change in more restorative practices in schools being less consequential in terms of suspensions and expulsions. There's many elementary schools use the color chart to kind of gauge student behavior throughout the day. And so a shift away from that in many elementary schools. And so for folks who have taught for a long time or who have been in a position, they're used to doing things the same way for years at a time. And they're often resistant to changing it and adopting new ways. However, it's our job sometimes to convince them otherwise, to just give it a chance. Even if you have to complain while you're trying, I'll accept it. And then let's revisit it, see if it's actually as bad as you thought it was.
When you mentioned when your last statement talking about the older folks, no hate to them. We're trying to imagine how it's like, when you have people who've understood a certain system for the past 20 years, 30 years, and I think it's everywhere. It's a general thing. But in your own context, how do you think we should approach that in education to make that change very, very impactful? Yes, you've mentioned one point, which is, even if you need to be what do you call it, complaining and doing it, just keep doing it. Which other steps do you think can be possible to help impact that process? Because I think it's high time we start leaving the old system or the old curriculum to the newer curriculum, where we can integrate what is the future of what is going on today. Technology is everywhere. Let's start talking about what is really going to happen in the next 10 years, the next 20 years, not what has happened 30 years ago.
So I read this book. It's called Radical Candor. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a really good book. But the book is impactful because it allows you to have really good and structured conversations with folks, specifically when you want to give them feedback when something is not working. And so the way that the framework works in a book is you should state the actions or the things that happens, right? You're going to take your feelings out of it and then be very clear in articulating the impact that it has either on the organization or as the individual. And so I think about in the past when team members have wanted to change curriculum and they're saying that we want to change this curriculum because it's not effective for students. And I'm like, okay, great. So what's the impact of that? The impact is students are not engaged and students are underperforming. Great. That was a very clear, opposition to keeping the curriculum. And so now we can change it. I think sometimes we get too bogged down in the feelings of we don't want to do this because we don't want to. And that's not valid. It is a school, it is a business, and we need to make sure that we're making decisions that make the most sense. And so when you're able to present your opposition to change more clearly, it allows us as leaders to move accordingly and to really hear what your concerns are. And so in thinking about even in the curriculum discussion, most recently, I've had someone that I work with oppose the curriculum that we've chosen. And so, my kind of response is we're going to try it again for another few months with fidelity, because in past it was not used with fidelity. And then we will truly know if it's having the impact that we want, and then move from there.
So is there some kind of a ground team, if I would use it, or a ground force team that follows up to make sure that each department or each staff actually implements some of those things?
Yeah, I think it goes into the rollout too. And so when thinking about implementing change, I always, as the leader, um, am very clear and explicit about what I'm going to do to support the staff in doing the change. So for instance, in this example of changing the curriculum, I've laid out clear professional development opportunities for them to learn how to understand the curriculum and to implement it. And then I will co-observe with some of their leaders on their school teams in order to really give them feedback on the implementation of it. I find that when you're just directing others about things that are changing, you're not on the ground with them, it's not received well. Versus this is something that we're all doing together. Yes, it is going might be a little difficult, it might be a little hard, but we're going to get through this. And I know because I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to see the things that are working and I'm going to see the things that are not working. I'm going to praise you when you're doing great and I'm going to hold you accountable when you miss the mark.
Thinker. That's a good way. I'm definitely going to put this down. Having to hold everybody should be accountable of what they need to do. So thank you for sharing that. And I think we're having some shout outs here in the comments box. Erica Harris, thank you very much for joining us. Erica is saying special education is important to break stigmas around educational abilities while integrating neurodiversity into neurotypic spaces. Do you have any comments to that?
Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. We need to increase the knowledge of folks about it, so that way we can support each other and that our children and adults have choice-filled lives.
Thank you. Okay, so Diana, I want to take you a little bit out of our discussion right now, and let's talk about you. Let's talk about Diana Williams, right? Let's talk about what you've been doing so far. So we've had different years. We've had from 19 whatever, from 18 whatever, but today is 2024. But let's talk about 2024. How has 2024 been for you since January till today being the 1st of August? Is it different from every other year, or is it what how's the year been like for you?
The year has been great. I would say it's different but the same, right? We have the same type of problems in education and leadership that we've had over the past couple of years. And it might look a little different, but at the root of it, it's all the same things. People want to be paid more. People want more time, all those good things. People want more support. So it's been a great year for me. I've been able to support a lot of teachers and leaders, and just feeling more confident in where they want their departments to go. And so that makes me happy. I've also had a great balance between work and travel and hanging out with friends and family. So that's anything I could ever ask for.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, have you had the time to, in terms of leadership and right, in terms of leadership and in terms of management, right? Do you think 2024 is when we're having more people seeking out to have more leadership role or to ask questions about what should I need to know as a leader or what don't I need to know as a leader?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think we are in an era where people are valuing their time, flexibility, and autonomy. Whereas in the past, I think that folks were more invested in climbing up the ladder, and getting these top level titles and positions. But I think now we're in a space where people want to be their own boss. They want to be their own entrepreneur, so that they can have their own mark on the world and take time off to spend it with families if they want, or travel with their friends if they want. But I think that the thing that people don't realize is that even if you choose to be your own business owner, if you choose to be an entrepreneur, it's still a lot of leadership qualities that you need to possess. Thinking about how to make solid decisions, right? Learning how to work with and communicate across lines of difference and communicate with folks that you generally might not get along with or might not want to speak to, right? I think about the leadership, just the leadership adaptive skills of having difficult conversations, of knowing how you can enter a room and assess who's in the room, knowing who you need to network with, who you need to speak to, how to build that relationship, so that way y'all can collaborate and partner going forward. So entrepreneurship, even though folks want to go in that direction, they still need some of these leadership qualities that I'm afraid that often people are not getting because they think leadership is just being the boss. And that's not it, right? Leadership is more than being a boss. Leadership is making sure that you have enough revenue so that you can pay your people, so that you can support your people. But I think that goes, over some people's heads, unfortunately.
Why do you say so? Why do you say it gets to people's head?
Because I think about the entitlement that I've encountered with some folks recently, where they believe that they should get more money for doing the bare minimum or doing their job, or they should get more than, I don't know how it is in Nigeria, but at many jobs, I don't want to say most, I don't want to say all, but at many jobs that are salaried, sometimes folks get a COLA increase, which is typically between 1.5 and 3% each year. And so when folks don't get that, they feel entitled to get more. Um, I think about folks that want to have the title and the perks of like a flexible schedule or a lot of vacation time, but they haven't put in the work to deserve it. They just want, the top paying salary and all the glitz and the glamour without having to roll their sleeves up and really get in the dirt to work for it.
Well, but don't you think people tilting into, or let's say having more entrepreneurs in the system or in the market is really helping to advance things globally than just having everyone going into the corporate space, having to just work and work their entire life.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because just because someone has a business does not mean that it's successful. It does not mean that they're generating enough revenue to actually contribute to, society. They're not employing anyone. They're having businesses that can barely sustain themselves, let alone someone else that they're, paying and contributing to their family. I think that in order for our society to work, we need people in all the positions. Everyone doesn't want to be a boss and everyone doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, and that's great. In the same way that everyone doesn't want to be a janitor, but we need someone in all these different roles in order for us all to operate.
Thank you for emphasizing that. So from the comments, we're having Dr. Marcia saying very much so. Okay, she's saying very much so. People understand what matters, and then the world is flat and they can become masters of their own destiny. Persons are more willing to ascend diverse, survival, and inclusive discussions and innovate problem solvers. Yeah, you see, yeah, you have the nail on the hit one to get the results for things there. Okay, I think that's a comment from Dr. Marcia. Thank you very much, Doctor, for that. Thank you, Samuel Akpet. He's a brand designer at Now with the Manager. Thank you for tuning in. And Ukeme and Nephew, good to have you today. And every other person who's watching and listening to this, apologies for the internet issue we're having today. We just have to deal with that for now, just for today. I think by next week, hopefully, we are going to have a good network to broadcast freely. But still, if you cannot join us or listen to us on LinkedIn, please do out tune in on YouTube. And you can search for Now with the Manager on YouTube and find out, also on Twitter. And let's continue to learn and share this together. We're 4 minutes already into the discussion. Please feel free to share the link across with your folks. Let's continue to learn and share valuable information together. So, thank you very much, Diana, for the insight and the input you've been able to share so far in terms of leadership, right? So, for the guys in the special education space, right, do you think the future is really going to be something somewhat different from what we used to see in the past with the emergence of technology? Are you seeing them doing more stuff to also incorporate them and make life favorable for them too?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting, right? So the special education population has increased, and it's hard to say that it's even increased. I think the number of children that have been identified as having a disability has increased since COVID due to COVID learning loss. I think there's also a great population of adults that are recently going to the doctors and realizing that they have ADHD, which is not a disability, right? But it's something that is impacting how they show up in the world, how they show up at work. And I think as we continue to go on in the future and thinking about technology, thinking about artificial intelligence, AI, we're going to create a gap, unfortunately, if we are not intentional in providing with students with opportunities to learn how to use these systems, how to navigate these systems, particularly students with disabilities inside of urban and inner city communities. They're going to be at a loss when their white peers and affluent communities are able to navigate these systems online in order to get them to the next space, whether they're an entrepreneur or not. And so I think when thinking about the trajectory of how society is going, of a more technological space, it's important that we're providing these opportunities for students. And I think it's great, right, that we have this technology that can help folks gain access to things that they didn't have access to before. So thinking something as simple as text to speech, or speech, I always get confused, speech to text, right? If a student has difficulty communicating their thoughts in writing, they can speak their thoughts onto paper, right? And that's something that a student can do and also an adult can do at work. I think about the ability to use AI in meetings. I use Fathom. I've also used or heard of Otto, just other note-taking software platforms that adults can use in meetings, specifically if they have ADHD, which is attention deficit disorder, where they're having a difficult time engaging in conversation and taking notes. So using AI systems like that can help them take notes and summarize it easily so that they know their next steps and they can remember what happened in the meeting. So we have to be very intentional about infusing more of these experiences and just AI and technology in our classrooms so that both students and adults are able to utilize it in order to be successful on a daily basis. Oh, I think we lost him. Well, that gives me a great opportunity to share. I have an upcoming webinar, a free webinar on September 18th at 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where I will be teaching folks how to use AI in the classroom to help students with disabilities, to help students that are multilingual language learners, just teaching them how to use some of these different tools so that way folks gain access both to instructional content, whether it's to meetings and different things like that. And so I'll definitely be able to share that info with you all if you're interested to tune in. Like I said, it is something that's transferable both in the classroom setting, but also to the real world, because we're realizing that there are a lot of adults that also have some of these challenges, these learning difficulties and barriers that some of our students do. And so my goal is to just really help you feel successful. And I think often about the adults that says that like school just isn't for them or math isn't their subject. And it's often because they've had a difficulty and a potential learning disability that have never been addressed. And so they've never been taught in a way in which their brain understands for them to be successful. And so I want to work to support people so that they feel successful when they are in the workplace, whether it's having a difficult conversation, whether it's organizing their computer or organize their workspace so that they can operate in a way that's going to yield positive outcomes. And then we'll wait for him to come back. Tried to fill in the gaps there. I am on the LinkedIn too. So if you have any thoughts or questions, I can definitely read and answer those in the meantime until he returns back to us. Okay, so that's a great question. I saw someone say, how might we connect? So all of my information is tagged on the post for this event. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw the live. I would love to connect, whether it's for a school or for a corporate leadership. I offer leadership trainings as well, where we can dive into the different leadership types that exist and how that shows up in your work with your teammates, and then what barriers and strategies y'all can use to navigate together so that teams are more successful at your work.
Okay, so take for instance, right, what is going on in the system today. I know we have what is called the president of Virgin Airlines. I'm trying to remember his name right now. Who has this dyslexia, right? And you see him as someone who might be different from the system, from the society, but has been able to get or attain that certain height for himself personally, right? And imagine every other person who is like him, who thinks like that. What do you think education is really going to do for people of those category to also see that, oh, from him I can also draw strength and draw confidence to come out and be something, and also lead brands, lead organizations, and probably get a better life for myself and not only hold back on my disability?
I think it's twofold. I think the first is educating the masses on what different disabilities there are and what they can look like. I think sometimes about organizations that hire folks and they're frustrated because maybe someone doesn't understand directions, or they're not catching on quickly enough, or it just seems like too much, right? So we have to educate the masses on what disabilities are, because a disability does not limit someone from having a choice filled and typical life. On the other hand, for folks that do have a disability, it's about teaching them what works for them and what they need to be successful. And so thinking specifically, taking it back to the classroom for our youngest kids, 5, 6, 7, right? These are kids that often have big feelings, but don't have the words to kind of put to them. And one of the things that we often talk to teachers about is the simplest rephrasing of questions. When a student is crying or a student is angry, instead of asking them what's wrong, asking them what happened, right? Because they might not be able to articulate the feeling of why they're upset or why they're sad, but they can definitely tell you what happened that led to this. And then because we are someone with more emotional awareness, we're able to put two and two together to start teaching them the words, right? And so then when I have a kid that maybe is continuously angry or continuously sad, I can start teaching them the signs of when they're starting to feel a way and then what to do. So, for example, I've had some students with big feelings of anger where when they're feeling angry, they want to throw a chair or push a desk, right? And so, with my work with them, it's like, okay, something happened that wasn't fair. You're valid to feel how you feel. However, we cannot throw desks and push chairs. And so instead, I want you to give me a signal that signifies that you need a break. So with the one student in particular, whenever he would hold his fist up while I was teaching, I would know that this means he's angry and he needs a break. So I would be teaching, he would just do it, and I would say, go. During that break, he knew he would take the timer, set it for 3 minutes. He would go for a walk in the hallway. He could go to the bathroom. He could go get water, do whatever he wanted in the 3 minutes, and then he was expected to come back to class. Now, of course, this is something that I had to train him on over time, but he was able to use it very independently. And he was at that time, I want to say 6. And then eventually he didn't need those long breaks at all. I think about the same thing as adults, right? If we know that we have a friend or a loved one that's a hothead, we want to teach them what are the things that's leading up to that so that you can start to notice that, okay, I'm starting to get hot. Before I blow up, maybe I should go for a walk. In the same way, if I'm dyslexic or I'm an adult that struggles with reading, I might say, hey, I know this meeting is coming up. Can you send all documents to me in advance? That way I can read them and process it before the meeting and then be prepared to share out. Or can you actually send me the digital copy so that way then I can use technology and software to read it aloud to me and then I can process it a little bit better. Sometimes we sit in meetings with folks where we are presented an idea and we're like, so what do you think? And they're like, nothing. It's because they're still processing. Some people need more processing time, but we also need to value other people's time to say that, hey, read this, consume it, process it, and then come back and share your thoughts so that we can take the next steps forward together.
But how do you cope? How do you cope with buying into that patience to to carry them through that process?
I think it's about being a good manager, right? I'm only as successful as my team is. I cannot do the job by myself. If the corporation or the owner of Delta Airlines or McDonald's didn't have any workers, there would be no McDonald's. So you have to invest in what your employees need to be successful. And if this particular employee needs for me to send the agenda in advance so that way he can structure his time, then I'll do that. If this employee needs me to write step by step everything that he needs to do to make a burger and then to add the fries to the bag, I'm going to do that because I want us to be successful. I do think, though, you have to be clear on when you are, I wouldn't say acquiescing, but when you're meeting folks where they are versus when you've done all that you can and it's not working. So I think there is a balance, but I think sometimes people lose frustration with folks very, very easy. And these are the organizations and companies that you see that are having a lot of turnover, right? And it's hard for any company to grow when they're constantly having new staff and employees over and over again. Versus if you just invest in the ones that you have, get rid of the bad apples, y'all can grow together and y'all can be able to scale and do greater things. Versus if I'm constantly training and onboarding and offboarding staff members, I can't even focus on growing the business because I need to focus on always recruiting and hiring. And if anyone has recruited and hired, you know that is a very time consuming and frustrating process. So the less time I can spend doing that is ideal.
When you mentioned hiring and firing, and I remember a post I saw, I think yesterday on LinkedIn, when one of my connections was actually mentioning lists of things you should kind of avoid, and it was like if you have any bad apple, you fire. I think that was the statement, and I'm like, if you keep firing everybody, right? If you keep hiring and firing, hiring and firing, how are you going to have the time to even train, like you mentioned? How are you going to, because having to train people to start afresh, to connect afresh, to get to know this person afresh, every 3 months you're going through that process of knowing someone afresh, understanding the person's work process. It's mentally draining having to go through that process. It's amazing if you have someone long term, but always starting that process afresh is something very crazy. And I think it's good that you've been able to spot on that, right? For us to know that continuity is important. And I think we've also had that discussion here before. Continuity is very important. Not having people where you train and then you're always looking out there.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the bad apple, and I feel like that's often controversial. If I had an employee that, let's root this in a headline of will versus skill. If I have an employee that's low skill but high will, I want that employee over the one that is high skill and low will. Let me put that in layman's terms. So our high skill, low will person is the person that's great at their job, but they're always miserable. They're always complaining about something. They're always having a sour face. Something's always the problem. And actually, I don't want to deal with that because that can spread like wildfire. Versus the person that's low skill but high will, they want to be good at their job. They just don't know how to do that. I can invest my time building them up because that's the person that's going to have a positive effect on my staff culture versus the person with high skill and low will and negative energy. They can go somewhere else with that because that's not how we're going to build a culture and a successful company.
Thank you for that. But how did that turn out for you when you had to implement such strategy?
I mean, I think it's often hard, right? I think the first thing you want to do with the person is acknowledge that they're valuable. To say that you are a valuable asset to our company and you have great potential. However, some of the interactions that you have are not so pleasant. And so I'm going to need a commitment from you to just show up a little better. Show up as your best self, that is your worst self, right? Because a part of doing your job is also having positive relationships with those around you. And right now, people don't want to work with you because they feel that you have a negative energy. And so after we having this conversation, this heart to heart, I want to see in actions that they're actually trying to be more positive or at least more neutral. I'll take neutral. You don't got to be positive. You just got to be neutral. You can't be negative. After we have that conversation, I'm watching your actions, right? Are they making deliberate intentions? Yes. I'm praising them. I'm like, I see you work. I see you're smiling. I see you're talking to people. Shout out to you. Or to say, hey, I know it's a lot to work on. However, I'm still looking for you to do this, this, and this. And then we take it 2 more weeks and they're still not changing. And actually, it's time to have the conversation that I don't think that this is the place for you because you're not happy here. And so maybe you should go somewhere else.
But thank God we've been able to carry on with this, and thank you for sharing that. Right, talking about low will and then high skill, or rather low will, high skill, and then high skill, low will. Right, and understanding that this person, all he or she needs is just that time to to grow better, that time to give in the best, and it also spreads. It also spreads with every other person because if you have to go for high skill and then the will to do the job, every time you have to try to motivate the person to always do the job. And trying to motivate someone alone itself, it's a job, right? Just being able to reach out to you when you should be able to reach out to me personally, but I have to reach out to you at my own time, spare out my own time, which I expect that you know your job, you know what you should do, and it should be a give and take, right? You give in, I give in. What while you're getting the best output, you ask questions, you get results, and then we all both get better. You get to grow and you get to bring the best out of it. But sometimes you get to find the opposite, like you've mentioned, and I think the faster we get to take out those bad eggs, just take out the eggs, and then let's see how to drive our organizations to success. Not really a bad egg. I think it's just you finding a safe landing, because it might still be the environment where you find yourself that is not giving you that liberty to. Because I feel like some people, if they find themselves where there is more competition, right? If you know that, realize that you're not the only person who is very skilled at what you're doing in that organization. It's going to also drive more engagement and more motivation. I don't know if you've experienced that before.
Definitely. Yeah. When you feel like when you realize you're not the secret sauce. Like everyone's the secret sauce. So definitely, I agree.
Wow. Thank you very much. And well, we've successfully brought this to an hour, right? And apologies to everybody. Um, our conversation today has been in and out. Thank you to Diana for being very patient and understanding with the situation of things today. And thank you very much to everybody. Uh, Trust me, I would have loved to say let's continue to drive this discussion because it's a very interesting one. And I will bring this back up again. Myself and Diana, we're going to have this discussion again sometime probably in October. We'll get to schedule a time, or maybe October or November. We'll get to schedule a time to have this discussion again because talking about special education is very important. Let's see how to help the disabled ones in our society. Let's see how to also build a society that can also bring them in, a society that can also involve them, a society that also engages them, right? Not only looking at them as strange people or people who are not from this planet. After all, we are all from one creator, right? So we also need to see each other as one. So having this discussion will also give room for education, for schools, for institutions, might be private, might be public, to also make plans to accommodate and make the best outputs, right? It might not really be going to school, but having to have online schools like Diana does, you can as well search for Diana and then you see amazing stuff that she's doing, right? You get to learn from home, you get to learn and then you learn and come out the best. Sometimes you might even find out that learning from home, you might even be more skilled than those who are in the school, sitting in the classroom and then answering 1+1 every day by day. And it's crazy. It's crazy to think about it. But thank you very much, Diana, for the time and thank you very much for the insights. Before we wrap up this discussion, please, do you have any last word you'd like to share with our audience today?
No, I would just love to connect with you all. Please send connections on LinkedIn. Check out my Instagram as well, the SPED Educated Leader. Again, I have the upcoming webinar on September 18th where we're diving into AI and special education of how to utilize that to push access for folks. And yeah, I just really appreciate being here with you. Despite the tech issues, I feel great about it. I think we had a great conversation and thank you so much for inviting me to your platform.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Please, anybody who wants to connect with Diana, reach out to her either on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Instagram. I think preferably on LinkedIn, you can always get across to her at any point in time. So you could just maybe put in the topic of today, and I think she'll be available to respond to you anytime, any day. I'm Ubong Matthew, your host for this discussion. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime, be on my DM. We want us to have some discussions, some managerial discussions. Might be your podcast. You might want to start a podcast or something. Come, let's have some discussions or your social media. Let's see how to talk about the future of work tomorrow. And my DM is always open to respond to you at any point in time. And please, we have a survey which is going out to our audience and every other person. Please, in case you come in contact with that, please do well to drop a feedback and let's know your thoughts. Let's see how we can drive this brand to be that brand that you can always stay comfortable to relax and get valuable information and have once in a while get to host very interesting guests and experts on this very discussion to drive the future of work and digital education. So thank you very much, everybody, and happy new month. And I hope to see you guys next week on the 8th of August for another insightful discussion. Have a wonderful night and a day from wherever you're joining us from.